My wife demanded half of everything in the divorce, only to discover none of it actually belonged to me. At 25, I had recently started my first proper job working in my family's business. As their only child, my parents had always been incredibly supportive and trusting, laying the foundation for a life that seemed picture-perfect. I was newly married, fresh from a dream honeymoon, and my career was just beginning to take shape. The honeymoon had been an indulgent escape to a tropical paradise, filled with romance and adventure. We'd explored exotic beaches, gone on scenic drives, and enjoyed guided tours. It was everything I thought a honeymoon should be, or so I believed. Shortly after returning home, I was going through the photos and videos from our trip. Among the files were videos I'd taken of the rental car, a habit I picked up from my father to avoid disputes over damage claims. But what I found on one of those clips turned my world upside down. It wasn't a scenic drive or a candid memory. Instead, there she was, my wife, completely naked and tangled up with the travel guide we'd hired. The footage was explicit, and the setting unmistakable. The very car we'd rented. It had happened while I was back at the hotel handling last-minute bookings for the next day. I froze, my stomach churning as I scrolled through more files. This wasn't a one-off incident. There were multiple clips, all revealing the same pattern. While I was busy planning our activities, she had been sneaking off with him. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Not only was it infidelity, but it happened during what was supposed to be one of the most sacred times of our relationship. That night, I didn't confront her. I needed time to think and process everything. As I reflected, I realized that none of what we had was truly ours. The house we lived in, it was owned by my father. The car she drove, registered under the family business. Even the credit card she used to flaunt her lifestyle, it was linked to accounts in my father's name. The only asset I could honestly call mine was the $25,000 I'd saved from freelancing during my studies. She didn't know any of this. She assumed we were building a shared life and accumulating joint assets. But in reality, I hadn't even started earning a formal salary. My parents wanted me to focus on learning the family business first. The betrayal hurt, but it also gave me a chance to expose her for who she really was while protecting myself. The next day, I got to work. First, I backed up all the videos to a secure drive and created multiple copies to ensure they couldn't be destroyed. Then, I reached out to a family lawyer, someone my father trusted. I decided not to tell my parents yet. I wanted a solid plan before involving them. The lawyer reviewed the situation and assured me that since everything was under my father's name, she had no claim to any of it. In fact, her demand for half of our supposed assets in a divorce would completely backfire. But before taking further steps, I needed to confront her. That evening, I asked her casually, "What was your favorite part of the honeymoon?" My tone was neutral, giving nothing away. She smiled, her face lighting up. "Oh, everything. The beaches, the food, the drives with the guide. It was all amazing." "The guide, huh?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "You seem to really enjoy his company." Her smile wavered. "Well, yeah, he was helpful." "Why?" I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my phone and played one of the videos. Her face turned ghostly pale as she watched herself on the screen. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice cold. She immediately began making excuses. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen," she sobbed. "I was drunk. He took advantage of me." I shook my head, unmoved. "Don't insult my intelligence. This wasn't a one-time thing. You knew exactly what you were doing." She broke down, crying and begging for forgiveness. But her tears left me unaffected. I told her I wanted a divorce and that my lawyer would be in touch. That's when her demeanor shifted. "You can't do this to me," she screamed. "I gave up everything to be with you. You owe me." "Owe you?" I said with a bitter laugh. "Everything we have isn't even mine. It's my father's. You're not getting a single cent." Her expression twisted with rage. "I'll fight you in court. I'll make sure I get what I deserve." "Go ahead and try," I replied firmly. "You'll regret it." After consulting with the lawyer, I looped in my father. When I showed him the videos, he was furious. Not just at her betrayal, but also at her audacity. He immediately revoked her access to the house and credit cards and began the process of legally severing her ties to anything under the family's name. She quickly realized her situation when her credit cards were declined, and she found herself locked out of the house the very next day. That's when the threats started. The following morning, I woke up to a barrage of text messages from her. They swung wildly between begging for forgiveness and issuing threats. One of them read, "If you think you can throw me out like this, you're wrong. I'll make sure you regret it." I wasn't surprised. She'd always been manipulative. But this time, she had no leverage. Every advantage she thought she had was already countered. I forwarded her texts to my lawyer, who assured me they'd be useful if she tried to make baseless claims in court. Later that day, she attempted to storm into my office at the family business. I was in a meeting with my father and senior staff when the receptionist called to warn me. The receptionist whispered, "She's here, and she's making a scene." Stepping outside, I found her yelling, demanding to speak to me. "You think you can lock me out of my house?" she screamed. "You don't get to make decisions without me." I stayed calm. "It's not your house," I said evenly. "It's not even my house. Everything you're fighting for doesn't belong to either of us." Her face turned bright red. "You're lying. I'm your wife. I'm entitled to half. Let's leave that for the courts to decide," I said, turning back toward the office and signaling security to escort her out. That evening, I sat down with my parents to explain everything. My father, usually the calm and measured one, was livid. "She thought she could pull this off and take what we've worked so hard for? She has no idea who she's messing with," he fumed. My mother, though equally shocked, responded with compassion. "You deserve better than this," she said softly. "We'll make sure she doesn't get away with it." With their full support, I felt more confident than ever. My father's legal team immediately started drafting the divorce papers, ensuring every possible loophole was closed. At the same time, I gathered as much additional evidence as I could to strengthen my case. As the days passed, her behavior became increasingly erratic. She reached out to mutual friends, spinning a narrative that painted me as abusive and controlling. Thankfully, most of them saw through her lies, knowing me well enough to recognize the truth. Some even came forward with stories about how she had openly bragged about her freedom during our honeymoon, a freedom that, in hindsight, was clearly her affair with the travel guide. Then came her biggest move. She officially filed for divorce and demanded half of everything. In her filing, she accused me of emotional abuse and financial control, claiming I had denied her access to our assets. What she didn't realize was that her case was as flimsy as her loyalty. During the first court hearing, my lawyer presented a mountain of evidence. The videos, the texts, and the financial records proving that none of the assets were in my name. The judge was unimpressed with her claims, especially after being presented with evidence of her infidelity. Her lawyer tried to shift the argument, claiming that the videos were an invasion of privacy. My lawyer, however, countered that the footage had been legally obtained as documentation from a rental vehicle. The real turning point came when my father took the stand. "The assets she's referring to, our house, our business, none of it belongs to my son," he explained. "He's still an intern learning the ropes. She has no legal claim to any of it." Her lawyer looked utterly defeated, while she seemed ready to scream. Outside the courtroom, she confronted me. "You've ruined my life," she hissed. "You'll regret this." I stared at her, unmoved. "You did this to yourself. Enjoy the freedom you wanted so badly." Her downfall didn't stop there. After the divorce proceedings, I ensured that her actions and the truth of her affair were known to her family and close friends. I didn't go out of my way to smear her reputation, but I didn't hold back when people asked why we had separated. Word spread quickly, and soon even her own family began distancing themselves from her. Her parents, once staunchly on her side, called me to apologize. "We were misled by her lies about you," her father admitted. "Had we known sooner, we never would have supported her actions." While I appreciated their apology, I made it clear that it couldn't undo the damage. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my life. My parents encouraged me to temporarily move back into the family home for stability, but I declined. I wanted to regain my footing on my own terms. My father, however, took one last step to protect me. He restructured the family business, consolidating assets further under his control. "We'll transfer everything to you in time," he assured me. "But for now, we need to make sure no one else can ever try something like this again." Months later, she made one final attempt to re-enter my life. She showed up unannounced at my office, looking disheveled and desperate. "I've lost everything," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know where else to go." I didn't let her finish. "You made your choices," I said, stepping past her. "Now live with them." Security escorted her out, and that was the last time I ever saw her. A year has passed, and I can finally say I've moved on. I've been thriving in the family business and recently earned my first promotion. The lessons I learned from this experience have made me stronger and more cautious in my relationships. Trust, I've come to realize, is a gift, not something to be taken for granted. If there's one takeaway from this ordeal, it's this: entitlement and betrayal come with consequences, and sometimes those consequences are poetic justice. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.